Hello on the air of the program Time. In this edition, Jahar Dudayev is either injured or in hiding. This is the opinion of the Russian military. In Moscow, inter-Tajik consultations resumed, and the ministers of foreign affairs of 5 CIS countries held their own meeting on Tajikistan. 30% of Russian children and adolescents suffer from chronic illnesses. This was noted at a meeting of the Russian government. The agreement on friendship and cooperation between Ukraine and Russia is ready for signature. This was stated in Kiev by the acting Prime Minister Marchuk. By the decrees of Boris Yeltsin, in Russia the minimum salary and pensions have been increased. The dollar continues to amaze. Its rate against the ruble in the last 3 days has fallen by 15 points. We'll begin our broadcast with news from America. Yesterday in the city of Oklahoma, possibly the largest terrorist act in the history of the United States occurred, possibly because the fate of many people under the rubble of the blown-up 9-story building is unknown. According to information at this hour, 36 people have died, including 12 children from the ages of 1 to 7. At least 200 people were injured. Among them were 6 artists of the Russian Ballet on Ice. But at the moment of the explosion, there could have been 500 people in the building. Presumably, this was an explosion of a car bomb parked near the building. Its force was such that the entire north facade of this 9-story building collapsed. The wave of the explosion was felt through several blocks. An evil, cowardly act. This, the President of the United States, Bill Clinton, described the explosion. He declared the city a zone of emergency and said that all measures are being undertaken to ensure the security of the population. We'll find those who did this, said the head of the American administration, and then justice will be swift, certain, and severe. The most probable track in this terrorist act is Islamic. Responsibility for the explosion was assumed by the organization, the Islamic Nation. A certain unknown person who called himself Muhammad Alali made a phone call in this regard to the RTL television in Brussels. The police and the FBI have announced a nationwide search for 3 men. They were noticed leaving the city at high speed on a brown pickup truck. All 3 ostensibly are of Middle Eastern origin. Incidentally, the Islamic version could have been planted in order to cover up the tracks. This terrorist act occurred on the 2nd anniversary of the raid of the headquarters of the Branch Davidian cult, which, as known, ended in fire and mass death of its members. They're also discussing a version of possible interconnection between the terrorist act and the New York trial over the participants of the explosion in the World Trade Center. We'll remind you then, as a result of the diversion, 6 people died and more than 1,000 were injured. Half an hour ago, our Washington correspondent Sergei Gorichov made contact with our editing office. The explosion in Oklahoma City resounded in the capital of the United States today. Here by the White House, security measures have been significantly increased. Meanwhile, there's basis for caution for other federal buildings in other American cities as well. Hence, this is how people were evacuated from buildings in Boston, Miami, and Wilmington, Delaware, and Portland, Ohio. The reasons were the same: anonymous phone calls with bomb threats. The police and the FBI don't comment much, but as was learned, they also received hundreds of phone calls with offers to help and leads to the criminals. The investigation of each report is being conducted. For now, television reports from Oklahoma City, with a population of 500,000 in the heart of the country, recreate the scenario of the incident. Now, it's clear that the explosion is the largest terrorist act in the history of the United States. They presume that there was approximately half a ton of explosive in the car. According to certain reports, it was made from ammonium nitrate, a substance which is used for crop fertilizer, and it may be purchased for $6 a bag. The Attorney General, Janet Reno, said that of approximately 500 people who may have been in the building during the explosion, more than 100 is not accounted for. Possibly there are survivors still under the rubble. To reach them, 2 to 3 days may be needed. On the day of the explosion in Oklahoma City, the police made an arrest on the other side of the country in New Jersey State, and for a different reason. They arrested 2 12-year-old boys who were making nothing short of napalm and were storing it in the school. Bill Clinton instructed today that the state flags be lowered on all government buildings of America until Monday. And the UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali expressed condolences to the families of people who died or were injured as a result of the terrorist act in Oklahoma. In the statement distributed today by the UN Press Service in Geneva, it says that the Secretary General is shocked by the death of innocent people, especially children. Tajikistan continues to remain a hot point on the map of the Commonwealth. Today in Moscow, actively there was discussion of the situation in that republic. Today in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, consultations interrupted yesterday resumed between delegations of official Dushanbe and the Tajik opposition. Its head, Haji Arbal Turazon Shadat, under the pressure from Iran and Afghanistan, agreed to return to dialogue. The sides intend to discuss the agenda of the forthcoming fourth round of dialogues in terms for fulfilling the ceasefire agreement. The striving for dialogue was expressed today also by the president of Tajikistan, Emomali Rakhmonov, stating that he is personally prepared to meet with the leader of the Islamic rebirth of Tajikistan, Saeed Abdul Nurid. The Tajik leader is prepared to indefinitely extend the ceasefire agreement, which was signed last year in Tehran, to expire this 26th of April of this year. The government of Tajikistan undertakes also to create necessary conditions for the immediate return of refugees. Meanwhile, the situation on the Tajik-Afghan border was discussed today by Andrei Kozyrev with his colleagues from Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzia. Involved in the conversation was the director of the Federal Border Services, Andrei Nikolaev. Opening the meeting, the head of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasized that Moscow previously is for peaceful dialogue of official Dushanbe with the opposition. At the same time, Kozyrev stated that Russia won't permit casualties among its border and military personnel, and armed provocations on the border will always meet with resolute rebuff. According to the press center of the Russian border troops in Tajikistan, the situation on the border, especially in its Pamir direction, remains alarming. On the Afghan territory, there is continued concentration of forces of the armed opposition. Last night, on the Panjshir direction, with an attempt at insurgents by two gunmen from Afghanistan, one was detained by Russian border troops, and the other hid near one of the Cossack villages. He's being sought by the Ministry of Security of Tajikistan, Iturtas reported. During his weekly meeting with Boris Yeltsin today, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Kozyrev, discussed the matters concerning his recent presentation at the Council on Foreign Policies, where the head of the Foreign Affairs Department announced the possibility of using military force to defend Russians abroad. Well, we must say the statement generated turbulent reaction, especially in the Baltic states. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andrei Kozyrev, rejected the laurels of reformers of international practice on the use of force. In response to criticism against recent remarks he made on Russia's right to defend its citizens, the minister quoted an excerpt from the article by the American Secretary of State Warren Christopher. The American leadership, I'm incidentally not speaking of the Russian leadership, demands from us that persistent diplomatic efforts would be strengthened by active threats of deployment of force by us. And when a decision is made to dispatch American forces outside our borders, we will direct them having placed clear objectives and provide all measures for victory. Evidently, Andrei Kozyrev is clearly surprised by the reaction to his statement because he feels that the reminder of Moscow about the readiness to defend its interests has brought nothing new into international practice. Chaired by the President, Boris Yeltsin, today in the Kremlin, a business conference on the problems of the relations of Russia with certain Transcaucasus states, members of the CIS, was discussed. At the meeting, they discussed matters of Russia's assistance in resolving conflicts and Russia's peace efforts. In the conference were also the chairman of the government of Russia, Chernomyrdin, the vice premier, Bolshakov, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Kozyrev, the Minister of Defense, Gorbachev, the director of the Federal Service of Security, Stepashin, and the director of Federal Border Services, Nikolaev. From Chechnya, representatives of the command of the federal forces report that at midday today, Russian subdivisions were in control of positions at access points to the mountain village Bamut in the west of Chechnya. As Interfox reported, the report of the command say that only periodically individual units of internal affairs are entering the village, carrying out their mission to liquidate gunmen. Dudayev supporters have entrenched themselves on the higher elevations over the village, shooting at Russian subdivisions. According to the representative of the command, Russian forces will completely take control of Bamut only after clearing these heights from Dudayev rebels. News that today combat in Chechnya was supposedly to be ceased on instructions from the Kremlin was denied in the apparatus of the aide of the President on Security Matters, Mr. Baturin, and in the headquarters of the Combat Air Forces of Russia, in the command of the air paratrooper divisions, in the headquarters of the ground forces, by the aide of Minister of Defense Agapov, and by the operative group of the territorial rule of federal organs of power in Chechnya, and finally by the press service of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia. Our correspondents in the zone tone of the conflict reported this evening from Argun. Tens of thousands of cartridges, hundreds of anti-tank and anti-infantry mines, automatic rifles, grenade launchers, all these weapons. In a word, an entire arsenal was voluntarily relinquished by the population of Argun and nearby populated points during the course of only 1 week. The Commandant's office of the city received instructions to demolish all of these weapons except for the Kalashnikov automatic rifles. Each day, field engineers are defusing the surrendered ammunition. Probably only these explosions are heard, and the fear endured previously remind the residents of the city about the nightmare which ended. Today, for the population of the city, stable water and natural gas supply was established. However, there is no electricity yet because the Argun heating electrical station was seriously demolished. Today, we distributed humanitarian aid to almost 4,000 people. That's 75 tons. Tomorrow, we are attempting to launch the bread factory into operation. Everything is ready. There's just a delay with flour. And there's one more problem on the territory of Chechnya, cleared of Dudaev rebels. Disguised as refugees, gunmen are seeping in. This was stated in an exclusive interview to our program by the commander of the Unified Contingent of Federal Forces, Anatoly Kulikov. There are attempts by the immediate circle of Dudaev to continue this war in the form of terrorist actions and diversions. Unfortunately, especially in Grozny, these individuals are getting through. We already have several cases when snipers killed not just military personnel, but government employees and persons who are actively beginning to restore the republic. The corresponding measures are being undertaken. What about the information on the whereabouts of Dudaev? Is he alive or what? There were many reports about his possible death or injury. Dudaev, for 4 weeks and more than 4 weeks, has not made any appearances anywhere, not either in mass media, in television, and we don't hear his voice on the radio. And this causes, therefore, serious suspicion as to whether he's there and whether he's alive. With the same question on the fate of Dudaev, on our request, the head of the Center of Public Communications of the Federal Security Services, Alexander Mikhailov, was approached by the correspondent of Perm Television, Mikhail Kalich. Mikhail is currently in Perm on a business trip. In executing the decision and resolution of the prosecutor on orders to apprehend and take Dudaev into custody, the operative brigades today are searching for Dudaev, and in the most varied regions of Chechnya, several brigades are at work, and we have operative information that Dudaev has been injured and is outside of the zone of combat. In any case, lately, Dudaev has not appeared anywhere in public, and those materials which have been lately shown on the screens of Chechen television by our assessments and the assessments of our specialists are materials dating back some time. Today, the Crimean topic remained current. The deputies of Simferopol condemned some of their colleagues who flew today to Kiev and proposed that the Supreme Soviet of Ukraine dissolve the current Kievan parliament. And in Kiev, the acting Prime Minister, Yevgeny Marchuk, stated that a full-scale agreement between Russia and Ukraine is already for signature, with details our correspondents. For the third day in Simferopol, the picketing continues in defense of the statehood of the Republic of Crimea. From morning, the Republicans gathered by the Supreme Soviet building, where a session is underway, and during the recesses between sessions, they moved toward the City Council building. In order to remove the state flag of Ukraine, they were met by a militia cordon. If on the square it was crowded in the sessions auditorium, nevertheless, the quorum did gather. The main question is about the political legal situation. We find ourselves in a position when there is pressure exclusively by force, and they don't want to accept any reasoning or arguments that the constitution and legislation of Ukraine have been violated, as well as international law. One more event disturbed Simferopol, that is the split in Crimean parliament. Some of the deputies, their number is being kept secret, decided to form a new Supreme Soviet on the basis of Ukrainian legislation. At the session, they were called schismatics. In the draft resolution, it says that they are provoking Ukrainian leadership to undertake illegal actions vis-à-vis the Supreme Soviet of Crimea. And further, this evening, the Crimean Parliament resolved to address the Supreme Soviet and the President of Ukraine with a proposal to review the decisions made between the 17th and 31st of March in respect to Crimea, and as well in the Simferopol Parliament also turned to the State Duma of Russia and to the President with an appeal to undertake measures to defend the rights of compatriots residing on the territory of Crimea and in a position of ethnic minority in Ukraine. Neither Sevastopol nor anything within its administrative borders will ever be a base for the Black Sea Fleet. This contradicts Ukrainian legislation, feels Yevgeny Marchuk. The position of the Ukrainian side is defined by the presence of two factors. First, the land of Sevastopol is the territory of Ukraine, and secondly, a foreign fleet in a sovereign state. The absence of appropriate legal basis is an impediment to resolve problems on a legal level. Kiev offered 10 documents for review, and Moscow is for resolving the matter in principle. Today, the acting Prime Minister said significant progress was the agreement of the military, whereby Ukraine offers Russia the Sevastopol and Southern Bay, where there are 512 docking positions, plus 71 objects of the infrastructure, which fully provides for the functioning of the Russian portion of the fleet. And now another topic. Yevgeny Marchuk is confident that all work and preparations for the visit to Ukraine by the President Yeltsin could be completed before the 9th of May, given the willingness of the sides. So he commented today on the statements by representatives of the administration of the Russian President that Yeltsin's visit to Ukraine will not occur by the 9th of May, Interfax reported. And now about elections. Yesterday, Grigory Yavlinsky announced his intention to run for president next year. Today, the ex-president of the former Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, stated that possibly he will submit his candidacy at the next presidential elections of Russia. I don't exclude that I will decide to participate in the presidential elections. He's quoted by Interfax today. As Gorbachev stated, he plans to contact those who call themselves centrist parties. On the 20th of April, 1945, the long-distance artillery of the 79th Shooting Corps of the 3rd Striking Army Force opened fire on Berlin. On the projectiles, the soldiers wrote everything which accumulated in their hearts that day: for Stalingrad, for Ukraine, for the orphans and widows, for mothers' tears. In Berlin, panic began. The day before, all factories came to a standstill. Coal had finished, lights went out, natural gas wasn't supplied, all transportation ceased. Together with thousands of refugees, the capital was fled by Himmler and Goering. One went to the north, the other fled to the south, to Bavaria. However, before that, both assured the Führer of their allegiance. Residents who were left in the city began to loot department and food stores, and just the day before, decent and proper city residents attacked each other for a pack of flour and fought for used clothing. No one remembered civilized behavior any longer. It was remembered by only Goebbels. In his address to the residents of Berlin on radio, he said that if Europe, with its culture and civilization, hasn't completely sunk into the depth of dark abyss which menacingly gapes before it, then it owes this only to Hitler. 2 years before, the same man had explained to Germans what civilization in the Hitler sense was. Do other nations live in prosperity, or are they perishing from hunger, is only of concern to me to the degree that they are needed as slaves for our culture. Now, history severely repaid the Germans for that suffering which they brought with their new Nazi culture to other nations. On that day, Adolf Hitler turned 56. On the 20th of April, he left his bunker for the last time so as to award the Gold Cross to the chief of the Hitler Jugend, Axmann. Without your youth, we couldn't have continued the war, he would tell him. Many of those fellows were 13 or 14 years of age. The majority of them would drag the dying fascist regime into their graves. History counted down the last days of the Hitler Reich. A little less than 3 weeks remains before the 50th anniversary of victory, but the war continues to remind us of itself. In the village Mladoy Tut of the Tver district, 3 children died when a mine exploded. As it has learned today, it has been established that a 6-year-old girl and 2 10-year-old boys found an anti-tank mine from World War II and attempted to take it apart. An explosion occurred. Found nearby and disarmed were 7 more mines, which lay in the ground for more than 50 years. The anniversary medals of the 50th anniversary of victory were awarded to a group of Czech veterans of World War II. In the Russian embassy, soldiers, partisans, and resistance fighters gathered. More than 2,000 Czechs were awarded with the Russian medal. Among them were veterans who fought on the Eastern Front, there where the fate of the war was decided. The commander, Karl Borsky, in March of 1939 fled fascist-occupied Prague and went through Poland to the USSR, was arrested and sent into the gulags. After the liberation in 1942 from Siberia, he came to Buzuluk, where the first Czechoslovakian Army Corps was being formed. In its ranks, he traversed the entire combat road from Kharkiv to Prague, was 3 times injured, and yet continued to serve in the army. Later, he was slandered and cast into prison, rehabilitated after the 20th Congress of the CPSU. Not one, but several lives were lived by the old soldier. But the main and happy event for him was May of 1945, the liberation of his homeland. He remembers Soviet brothers in arms, their heroism and breadth of heart. No one and nothing would overshadow the great historic feat of the Red Army. Thanks to Russia, says Karl Dworsky, and thanks that it remembered us today and awarded those who participated in the common battle for common victory. Boris Yeltsin signed today a law to increase the minimum salary levels. This law was adopted by the State Duma on the 12th of April and establishes that from the 1st of April the minimum salary will be 34,400 rubles and from the 1st of May 43,700 rubles. The President also signed a law to increase the minimum size of pensions and the manner of adjustment adopted by the lower chamber of Parliament 1 week ago. This law increases from the 1st of May the minimum size of the pension, and it will be now 43,730 rubles. Proportionally, the amounts of other pensions are increased as well. The head of state also signed one more law on the state protection for judges, official figures, law enforcement and controlling organs, which was adopted by the Duma in March. On Clean Thursday, the government was concerned with children and clearing salary debt matters. Unfortunately, still they can't liquidate debt. As of the 1st of April, the sum has reached 5 trillion rubles. Furthermore, late payments from the budget, the government's debt of honor, reaches destinations with great delay. Evidently, there is time for money to be turned over by commercial entities. Alexis Kavets individually singled out ministers for explanations on extinguishing debts. The performance of certain ones was deemed unsatisfactory. The Minister of Finances was instructed to expeditiously direct money into salary funds, to find a possibility to settle mutual non-payments through mutual settlements, and also develop the possibility of transferring the money to the accounts of employees. And the execution of the program, Children of Russia, one may call successful, because it's handled personally by the President. That's probably why all the appropriate financing, although with a delay, but is nonetheless paid. They say that this is an unprecedented case. Incidentally, here there are certain regions which receive children's money, but applied the money toward adult needs. Meanwhile, the projects united in the presidential program embrace only part of the problems, and they can't radically change the overall situation. In the country, child mortality is growing. The number of orphans is growing. 300,000 abortions were performed by girls from the ages of 15 to 18. And now, before summer, there's a serious problem of children's summer camps, especially for children from the north. Members of the cabinet completely supported all the proposals on increasing volumes of financing. In trading today at the Moscow Interbank Currency Exchange, the surprising tendency of the last days continued. The rate of the dollar again declined by 11 points and hence comprised 5,051 rubles for a dollar. And now news concerning television. The fate of the broadcasting of the public Russian television programs on the territory of Kazakhstan was discussed in Almaty on a high level. About the need for a sole information expanse to create a truly public television oriented toward the demands of the day and an enormous responsibility of the electronic mass media before time in society, these questions were discussed at the meeting of the Director of Public Russian Television, Blagovolim, with the Prime Minister of Kazakhstan, Kazhigeltin, Putin and later with the President of the Republic, Nazarbayev. It was decided to prepare a long-term agreement between Russia and Kazakhstan, which would define the forms and means of the existence of a sole television expanse. Russian and now public television, or Ostankino, in the sense of information, has great significance. I must say that Kazakhstan can't lose such an information field as the television Ostankino is. This channel is extremely popular in Kazakhstan. This channel brings to our people vast information, and my citizens, the Russian-speaking citizens, are very interested in it. Therefore, my desire is that now, in this difficult transitional period, television, which is the most influential source of mass media, should bring our peoples closer. All the problems of television broadcasting may be resolved if, of course, the final aim for everyone on whom decisions depend is the interest of viewers. The experience of English television in the report from London. Even in the West, even on television, the gates to commercial heaven don't open right away, and not simply. 4 years ago, for the first time in the 40 years of its existence, the commercial television company ITN received a carte blanche to independently make money, not relying exclusively on the capital of shareholders. During the period from 1993 to 94, the company managed to increase its profits by 49%. That's not a fantastic sum, but completely respectable in terms of television and news. $12 million, because the British television galaxy is growing actively and private television channels are multiplying who wish to buy the news. Also profitable is the exchange of news materials with American giants such as NBC, CNN, and the Australian ABC. The company has assimilated new television products not connected with the news. The ITN example shows that debits and credits may be successfully balanced without advertising the profits, from which ITN incidentally doesn't manage. 30 seconds, however, of ads in the country's most popular evening news of ITN at 2,200 hours costs more than $150,000. The anchor of the news program, Trevor McDonald, in a conversation with us, drew attention to the strategy of economizing, implying the painful process of cutting staff. But the axe did not descend all at once, nor on everyone altogether. Half of the staff was subjected to trimming over 6 years. During this time, those who were dismissed had time to arrange compensation so that competition between private and state television does not become bitter and doesn't become an exclusive rivalry for survival. Here, they haven't forgotten that a notion such as partnership exists, partnership of interests, partnership in service to the viewer. We continue news of the distant abroad, while in the United States, the investigation of the explosion in Oklahoma City continues. On the other side of the planet, in Japan, there is more frequent hearing of a new term, chemical terrorism. There's more than sufficient basis for such a term. For the second time through 1 month, Japan has personally felt the results of gas attacks by terrorists. On the 20th of March in the Tokyo metro, nerve-paralyzing sarin gas was used. On the 19th of April, what seemed to have been forgotten since the times of the First World War, Faskin gas. Also noteworthy is the fact that the Faskin attack in Yokohama was perpetrated on the same day when the Parliament of Japan, without any snags whatsoever, ratified a new law declaring criminal production or possession of nerve-paralyzing gases. But it seems that chemical terrorists have declared a war on the authorities and threaten with new gas attacks in response to the actions of the police who are investigating their crime. Immediately after yesterday's dramatic occurrence on the railway station in Yokohama, disclaiming responsibility was the religious sect Aum Shinrikyo, but a few hours later, the Japanese police arrested man number 2 in the ranks of the leadership of the cult, the 45-year-old Kiyohiro Hayakawa. In the so-called shadow cabinet of the cult, Hayakawa occupied the post of Minister of Construction and headed the destruction regiment, whose aim was to return apostates back to the cult. Hayakawa is suspected of many transgressions, and one of them are close ties between the Minister of Construction with Russia in the field of weapons. It's noteworthy that literally 2 years ago, by decision of the Ostankino Inter-Municipal Court, the activities of the religious organization, Aum Supreme Truth in Russia, has been banned and been considered to be liquidated. A ban was placed on television and radio broadcasting of programs of the cult. Against the organization, criminal charges have been filed. Lithuania demands that the countries directly involved in the occupation of the Republic to compensate for damage to its citizens by the Soviet and Nazi regimes. This is stated in a statement distributed today by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania on the return of property and compensation for harm caused, Interfax reports. The case of all the citizens of Lithuania is the title of the scandal which erupted after the publication in the press of materials on the illegal use of the means of the former Communist Party of Lithuania, and that's millions of rubles of fixed assets, by a group of members of the Democratic Labour Party, currently members of the same. But at the first press conference, the former head of the department of the Central Committee of the Lithuanian Communist Party, Alfonsas Navickas, refuted the allegations and spoke of efforts to preserve the property of the Communist Party of Lithuania so that it wouldn't end up in the hands of the party of Miklas Borakevičius on the platform of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. The heads of the Democratic Labour Party attempted to convince the press that the property of the Communist Party of Lithuania was transferred by the government of the time, which was headed by Kazimierz Prunski and Ieremidos Vagneros. Concealing it from Moscow, we wanted it to go to Lithuania, said the warden of the Labour Party in the same, Edeminos Kirkiros. However, the advisor of the President of Lithuania, Vladimiras Birozovas, does not exclude the fact that mistakes may have been permitted. At today's session of the same, the right opposition could not achieve adoption of a resolution to create a special commission to investigate the laundering of party property. The decision of the question was postponed to next week. A member of the same, Alfonsas Navickas, has cast off his parliamentary and party powers. Leading French politicians have their own problems. On Sunday is the first round for the presidential elections. Just as at the last presidential election 7 years ago, there are 9 official candidates registered, and they represent almost the entire political spectrum of contemporary France. The closer the 23rd of April, the date of the first round of voting, the more active the candidates are in informing voters and convincing them of their exclusive abilities to resolve all problems of society, not forgetting to harshly criticize the pre-election platforms of their basic competitors. The voters are mostly concerned now with problems of unemployment, accessible housing, and improvement of the healthcare and education systems. A sign of the times, one may call the previously unseen during the election campaigns the increase in the striking movements. Not one day passes when the unions don't rally their supporters in the streets with demands of increased salaries. Unlike previous campaigns, in the current one, the social issues are no longer the prerogative of the left forces. Successfully accenting these issues, the presidential race is headed by the neo-Gaullist, the mayor of Paris, Jacques Chirac, continuing even now, according to the latest polls, to lead. But as he noted in an interview for the program Time, one mustn't rely too much on polls, which reflect probably the recent past more than predict the future. Wizened by bitter experience of 2 lost campaigns, the mayor of Paris evidently doesn't want to foil his current possible chance for victory. And now from current politics to the most exotic report of our broadcast, dealing with perhaps less important issues, although who was it that said that for women, questions of fashion are no less important than any others? Today, fashion from India. Only 3 or 4 years ago, to see a fashion show in Delhi was only possible in a 5-star hotel. And now, this type of festive shows are becoming more frequently the property of the broader audiences. And however, although as the Indian fashion designers themselves note, fashion in the sense that is understood in the West is making its first steps in India. And according to the figurative expression of one of them, it is only a summer rain for now, slightly sprinkling the ground. According to the number of those wishing to partake of the mystical world of fashion, and as well at this celebration, which was held in Delhi, the drops of summer rain are falling on fertile ground. And the most important place in the collection of Indian designers is, of course, still occupied by the sari. It today remains one of the most popular forms of apparel for Indian women, or, in the words of the poet, the most beautiful flower, the symbol of the refined culture of India. Popular, especially among the youth, and always dressy and yet comfortable, is the salwar chemise. Indian couturiers are working on clothing of European styles as well, but this, as they say, is more for the future because the miniskirt for now even vaguely can't compete with the sari. And so it happened. Everything which is painted by the Tkachov brothers, and they, by right, have the title of National Artists of Russia, was seen in life, with the eyes and with the heart, of course. This painting, The Farewell, is one of their older panos, also an absolute truth. A mother saw 3 sons to war. 2 of them returned. One of them became an artist. How many years have passed since Sergei Petrovich, the 42nd machine gun operator of the 5th Separate Striking Battalion, when he pulls out his photos from the front or his combat diary, which was preserved by miracle with its sketches and Yesenin poems, is always affected. Just now, he has completed this portrait. This is Mikhail Ivanovich Atamanov, the colonel who has been retired. We've been friends since 1942. This is also a type of memoir, a first etude of the warriors, painted on the cardboard of a carton for cartridges. This is the first wartime painting. Later, there were many paintings on the topic of war, and so he remembered, and he pulled out this etude from somewhere, the portrait of a neighbor stove repairman during the war. It turns out that he took a German general prisoner. And these are the new paintings. For years, the brothers Sergei and Alexei have been working together. This is part of the triptych called The Russian Field. In the center of it will be this painting called The Bells of Russia. And this picture as well, which they just completed and stands in the workshop. And this one as well, the recently completed painting, The Man Was Born, also soon to be seen by viewers. Today it was Clean Thursday, and I hope that today you've managed to wash or clean something. So as the tradition calls for, I bid you farewell, but waiting to meet with you is Oksana Polonskaya with the sports news. Good evening. You're watching the sports news. In Qatar, the World Soccer Junior Championships continues. The Russian team is in the quarterfinals, beating the Syrian team 2-0. And now the main topic of was decided virtually in the first time, and the Ajax in its performance was very much like the great team of the beginning of the 70s. And so the finale is on the 24th of May in Vienna, Ajax Milan. Despite the fact that before the end of the Russian Championships on mini soccer, the teams have to play 2 more matches, everything was decided today. First, the Minka team, the Russian Cup holders who played marvelously this season, won in a fervent battle against the KSM 24 team with a score 5-3 and won the silver medals. And then the leader of the Russian mini soccer tournament, the Moscow team Dino, convincingly beating the Spartak Moscow, also in advance for the 3rd time in a row, became the best in Russia. Good evening. In entering the 4th week of April, spring evidently has settled on all the territory of the European parts of Russia, but weather is not the same everywhere. Under the influence of a powerful Ural anticyclone, it's sunny and very warm in the central areas of Russia and along the Volga, where during the day the temperatures will be between 20 to 25 degrees. Warm air has come into the northeast parts of the European part of Russia, in the Volga-Vyatsk area and Komi, plus 15 to 20 degrees. Under the influence of a cyclone over the Kola Peninsula and in the zone of atmospheric fronts in the Murmansk-Arkhangelsk districts in Karelia, in the north of the Republic of Komi and in the Nenetsk Autonomous District, it's cloudy and rainy. Day temperatures from 5 to 10 degrees. During the night, some brief rain will pass through the Baltic states and the northwestern region. During the day, in connection with the formation of a small anticyclone over the Gulf of Finland, the weather will improve, the clouds will decrease, and the rains will subside. The temperatures will be as warm as plus 8 to 13 degrees. In Belarus, Ukraine, it's partly cloudy with plus 15 to 20 degrees. In Moldova, it's sunny from 18 to 23 degrees. In the south of Russia, in a zone of lowered atmospheric pressure, it's cloudy with rain and possible thunderstorms. In the Astrakhan, Volgograd, and Rostov districts, plus 19 to 24. In the Stavropol, Remeria, and in Kuban, plus 15 to 20. Vacationers on the Black Sea resorts are not lucky for several days in a row. There have been strong rains there, which will continue tomorrow, but the temperatures will not go above between plus 13 to 16. Beyond the Caucasus, variably cloudy skies. After noon, there will be isolated thunderstorms, temperatures of plus 13 to 18. In Petersburg, it's variably cloudy. During the night, some brief periods of rain, plus 6 to 8. During the day, 8 to 10 above zero. And Muscovitz, again, will see some sunny, warm weather. At night, plus 10 to 12. During the day, 22 to 24. It's interesting to note that the average temperatures during the day lately are 10 to 12 degrees higher than the norm. All the best. Goodbye.